So, who are the people of God? It's a huge question, right? It's at the absolute heart of the biblical story. And the answer? Well, it unfolds over thousands of years and takes a turn that I promise you, most people just don't see coming.
It all kicks off with this ancient promise. But the real story, the twist in the tale, is how that promise actually gets fulfilled. So let's trace this thing. We're going to start with a promise that looks totally broken and follow it all the way to its really surprising conclusion.
Okay, so let's rewind. It all starts in the Old Testament. God chooses the nation of Israel, right? They're meant to be his special people. But here's the thing. Their story doesn't exactly end with a happily ever after. It's more like a massive cliffhanger. We're talking failure, exile, and this huge central promise is just left hanging in the air, looking like it's never going to come true. The prophet Isaiah paints this really vivid picture to explain the problem. He says God planted a vineyard, and that vineyard is the nation of Israel. He was expecting, good fruit, things like justice and righteousness. But instead, he got bad fruit. It's a powerful way to say, hey, the chosen people completely failed to live up to their calling. The whole project seemed to go wrong. So that leaves this massive question mark hanging over the end of the Old Testament. If plan A didn't work, how on earth was God going to fulfill his promise, a promise he said was unbreakable, to have a people for himself? And then the New Testament comes along with this absolutely radical answer. It presents Jesus not just as some wise teacher, but as the personal embodiment of Israel itself. He's basically positioned as the one person who finally gets it right, who succeeds where the entire nation had failed. And this is such a key moment. The Gospels basically show Jesus reliving Israel's story, but this time, he nails it. You remember how the nation was tested for 40 years in the wilderness and failed? Well, Jesus is tested for 40 times days in the wilderness and passes. It's like he's becoming the true Israel, the one-man fulfillment of what God intended all along. But okay, it wasn't just about him being the true Israel all by himself. That's not the end of the story. Right away, he starts gathering a new community around him, a renewed people of God. And the way he does it, he uses these powerful symbols that back then would have been impossible to miss. I mean, think about it. Why 12 disciples? Why not 10 or 20? It wasn't random at all. For anyone listening, the number 12 screamed one thing: the 12 tribes of Israel. It was this super clear symbolic act. He was saying, I'm rebuilding, I'm restoring God's people, and it starts right here with this group. And get this, when Jesus talks about building his church, the Greek word he uses is ekklesia. Now that might sound like just a religious word to us, but it wasn't a new invention. It was the exact same word used in the Greek version of the Old Testament to mean the assembly of Israel. So he's basically saying, you know that assembly? This is the new version. It's a continuation. And you see this pattern over and over again. Promise, then fulfillment. For example, way back in the Old Testament, the prophet Ezekiel says God himself is going to become the shepherd to his scattered people. Fast forward a few centuries, and what does Jesus say in the Gospel of John? I am the good shepherd. He's literally stepping into the shoes of that ancient promise. And remember that vine metaphor we talked about? It happens again. We started with Isaiah calling Israel a failed vineyard, right? Well, in John's Gospel, Jesus picks up that exact same image and says, no, I am the true vine. He's basically saying he's the new source, the restoration. And anyone connected to him, the branches, can finally produce the good fruit that God was after from the very beginning. So, okay, Jesus is established to this renewed Israel, but the story is about to get even bigger. The next chapter, which you see play out in the book of Acts and Paul's letters, is all about how this community just explodes. It breaks right through its original ethnic Jewish borders and starts welcoming people from all nations. The Apostle Paul comes up with this brilliant metaphor to explain how this works: an olive tree. Think of it like this. The root of the tree, that's God's original promises. The natural branches, those are the people of Israel. But now, Paul says, these wild branches, that's the Gentiles, the non-Jews, are being grafted right into that same tree. And the result? Everyone is drawing life from the same root. It's not two different groups anymore. It's one single united people of God. Okay, so this leads to a really important, a really crucial shift. If this new people of God includes folks from every nation on earth, then what's the new membership card? What's the new defining feature? What makes you in? And here it is. This is the big one. Then, being one of God's people was all about your family tree, right? Your ethnic lineage, being a descendant of Abraham, following the law of Moses. Now, the entire definition changes. It's all redefined around one single thing: your faith in Jesus Christ.
Paul really drives this home. He basically says Jesus is the true descendant, the true seed of Abraham. So what does that mean? It means that anyone from anywhere who is united with Christ automatically becomes a child of Abraham too. The family line is no longer about blood, it's traced spiritually through faith in him.
So, where does that leave us? It leaves us with a pretty fascinating question for today, doesn't it? I mean, the people of God is now this huge global family made up of people from every culture you can imagine. So, what does it really mean for this incredibly diverse worldwide community to have its identity rooted not in a place or a language, but in the ancient story of one single nation, and how that entire story finds its meaning in one single person?